Being the first song the audience got to listen to all the way back in the Red trailer, Red Like Roses Part 1 foreshadows all 4 of the main girls with events or traits that are very prevalent to each of their own characters.
Red like roses fills my dreams and brings me to the place you rest.
RWBY's line is about the death of her mother, Summer Rose. The line Red Like Roses is a metaphor. The roses are representative of blood, Summer's blood in particular. It's even more so elaborated in RWBY's trailer with the Grimm that she kills because there is no blood, there's only roses. So in RWBY's dream, she's seeing her mother's blood, and because of this recurring memory or nightmare of hers, RWBY is always brought back to her grave. It's a reminder of the past events in her life, and because of that, she always returns.
White is cold and always yearning, burdened by a royal test.
Weiss's events have played out the most of the 4 main girls currently. Weiss's childhood wasn't warm and fuzzy and full of happiness. It was cold and dark. We've come to learn this royal test of hers refers to her father, Jacques. We've seen Weiss constantly put in different scenarios where she's being evaluated. In the White trailer, in Volume 4, Chapter 6 Tipping Point, and even in the manga, she's constantly put through these tests of her father's to see whether or not she's truly worthy of inheriting the Schnee Dust Company. The line is even brought up once again in This Life Is Mine.
Burdened by a royal test. I won't be possessed, burdened by a royal test.
Where here she's burdened, in This Life Is Mine, she's not any longer. She refuses to do any more of his tests. Weiss's events relative to this song have already played out.
Like the beast descends from shadows.
Blake's line could be referring to 2 things, if not both of these things, and that's Adam and her being a faunus. The beast could be referring to Adam, since Blake is based off Belle from Beauty and the Beast, and the beast must be Adam. However, it's the words from shadows that could make it doubly about her faunus traits, because in Blake's song From Shadows, it's all about the discrimination of the faunus and how poorly they were treated. Either way, both Adam and the discrimination Blake went through because of her being a faunus are key characteristics that apply to and affect Blake in major ways.
Yellow beauty burns gold.
This one seemed the most simple, yet I found to be the most complicated. Whereas the previous 3 lines were very important to each individual character, RWBY's mom, Weiss's dad, Blake's past, Yang seemed to be nothing more than a simple way to define who she is with no real weight on her character. So because I refuse to accept what seems like such an obvious answer, here's the way I like to see it currently. Yes, Yang is a blonde beauty who, when enraged, is dangerous, but such a fiery spirit isn't necessarily a good thing, because a fire is something that gets really out of control very quickly, and it's dangerous. So while Yang burns gold, it's something that she needs to control and make sure she doesn't get too out of hand with it. But that's how I choose to interpret that line. Now, unlike Red Like Roses Part 1, where each line represented each member of Team RWBY, Red Like Roses Part 2 is solely about RWBY and the loss of her mother, Summer. It's kind of like a conversation between the two.
I couldn't take it, couldn't stand another minute. Couldn't bear another day without you in it. All of the joy that I had known for all my life was stripped away from me the minute that you died.
This is where RWBY's pain began. While in the show, she's always appeared to be fairly happy and upbeat, this song shows us that that's not exactly the case. Her mother has been dead for an undetermined amount of time as of now, and RWBY appears to have hidden this side of herself behind her own wall, not showing the pain she went through of losing her mother.
To have you in my life was all I ever wanted, but now without you I'm my soul forever haunted. Can't help but feel that I had taken you for granted. No way in hell that I can ever comprehend this.
There's a popular saying, you don't know what you have until it's gone. This is especially prevalent when it comes to the people you're close to, the happiness, the joy they bring you, and when they're gone, you tend to realize you've taken a lot of it for granted. So now that RWBY's without her mom, this memory of her torments RWBY's soul, and she doesn't know how she should be handling this scenario, especially since RWBY's age when this happened was presumably very young.
I wasn't dreaming when they told me you were gone. I was wide awake and feeling that they had to be wrong. How could you leave me when you swore that you would stay? Now I'm trapped inside of every single effing day.
This is where RWBY was going through her denial stage. She didn't want to believe her mother was dead when she was told, but she ultimately comes to the harsh reality that her mother is now dead and her life is now haunted by this rude awakening.
It's like a movie, but there's not a happy ending. Every scene's made black and there's no pretending. This little fairy tale doesn't seem to end well. There's no lightning shining everyone waving from the spell.
This verse uses a bit more imagery by bringing up fairy tales, which all of Team RWBY was based off of. However, unlike such popular fairy tales in which a hero tends to save the day and everyone lives happily ever after, in this scenario, it's a lot more of a grim and bleak ending. RWBY's not particularly angry because she knows what Summer was trying to do. She essentially went to war to presumably try and end some conflict that was happening. But instead of putting an end to it, Summer ended up dying herself, now leaving RWBY alone and having to be the one to stop everything alone. Summer didn't want that, but that's what ended up happening. Once again, using red roses as an analogy for Summer's blood, it doesn't matter what RWBY does, this imagery always finds a way back to her thoughts and dreams. It seems that as time has gone on, RWBY slowly but surely edges closer and closer to letting her mother's death consume her. Emptiness and sadness is what she doesn't want, but it's taken the place of her mother. Summer's gone, and those feelings are the only things that are left for RWBY to feel.
I know you're broken down by anger and by sadness. You feel I left you in a world that's full of madness. Wish I could talk to you if only for a minute. Make you understand the reasons why I did it.
Now we switch to the perspective of Summer. She is dead. This is just her ghost's perspective looking back at what she really ended up doing. The pain, the sorrow, the frustration that RWBY's going through. But Summer feels as though RWBY doesn't know why she did what she did. Summer just wants to explain herself to RWBY so that these feelings that RWBY was left with could be eased, if only just a little.
I wanna tell you that you're all that ever mattered. Want you to know that for eternity I'm shattered. I tried so hard just to protect you, but I failed to. And in a prison of abandonment I jailed you.
This is where a bit of Summer's regret comes in. There's no scenario in which she wouldn't have regretted something, but in Summer's choice that she made ultimately left RWBY abandoned. Some fans also believe that her line about being shattered for eternity is some symbolism or clever writing to hint that Summer may be part of, if not the entire moon, which is why it's shattered. But currently, that's just fan speculation.
I never planned that I would leave you there alone. I was sure that I would see you when I made it back home. And all the times I swore that it would be okay. Now I'm nothing but a liar and you're thrown into the fray.
Summer's plan didn't involve her death, at least not to her knowledge. She was expecting to return to RWBY after everything was done. However, as we can tell, that wasn't what happened. She died, and she feels as though she's lied to RWBY. She said everything was gonna be okay, and it wasn't.
This bedtime story ends with misery ever after. The pages are torn and there's no final chapter. I didn't have a choice, I did what I had to do. I made a sacrifice and forced a bigger sacrifice on you.
Summer, like RWBY this time, is using the imagery of fairy tales in this verse with the bedtime stories. However, this scenario that RWBY is going through is not a happy one. But Summer still seems to be defending her actions, saying that going to fight in this battle was the one and only option she had to choose from. And hopefully, in potentially stopping some evil, her daughter could live in a world that wasn't so tainted by darkness. But ultimately, her sacrifice seemed to have been in vain, now leaving RWBY alone and to finish whatever job it was her mother was incapable of doing. It's shocking to find out that Summer feels as though her death was in vain. In sacrificing herself, nothing happened. It was all useless. And Summer, being the mother she is, doesn't want RWBY's fate to play out the same as her own, because she's already been through enough as it is. She doesn't need another burden in her life. Ruby and Summer's lines are now interweaving with one another. It makes it out as if the two are directly talking to each other, however I think it's more so a poetic way for Ruby and Summer to sing with one another, since they can't actually communicate. But Summer's perspective that she seems to be holding on to this entire song is the greater good. Yes, she wants to be there for Ruby, and Ruby needs her, but more people need her elsewhere. But Ruby isn't seeing it from that perspective. Ruby seems to have latched onto her mother more than anyone else, her father and also her sister, even having decided to keep her mother's last name as opposed to her father's. So with such a connection to her mother, to have that ripped from you, Ruby is understandably upset and torn down from it, especially since Summer's death apparently seems to have been all for nothing.
It doesn't matter how the battle's scattered now. Every night there's a discloses. It's your blood that spread like roses. And no matter what I do, nothing ever takes the place of you.
This final bit is more so a bow on the whole song, wrapping everything up. It's explicitly stated here that the roses are being used as a term in replacement of blood, and Ruby says that nothing can replace her mother, even when she tries to. This song is very interesting, especially in the show since Ruby shows zero signs of any of this. Her grief, her anger, her sadness, none of it is shown. It could perhaps mean that this happened a long time ago in Ruby's life, as far back as a 15-year-old girl's life could go with such memories. But in hoping that this song does have a level of canon behind it, I think that it gives a lot of depth to Ruby, especially since she seems to have walled off this side of herself. We see that she still does visit her mother's grave, but the nightmares and such that she was seeing either is now gone or she's hiding it. Either way, that was the breakdown and meaning of Red Like Roses Part 1 and Part 2. I hope you liked the video. If you did, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you're interested in more content like this. Follow me on all social medias, and I'll see you in the next video.